Good afternoon, aloha everyone, and welcome to our inaugural Honolulu Community College Community Connections webinar. My name is Karen Lee and I am the Interim Chancellor of the college. Next slide, please. Thank you, Liz. The one before. We decided to launch these conversations this year to help the Hawaii community during this challenging time in honor of our college's 100th anniversary. Honolulu Community College is the oldest UH community college in the state. We offer a strong liberal arts program, enabling students to seamlessly transfer to a four-year university, plus more than 20 career and technical education programs in a wide range of in-demand fields such as early childhood education, to diesel mechanics, to architecture, engineering, and CAD technologies. HCC also offers a robust non-credit program and the largest apprenticeship program in the state. Since we were unable to hold our biannual celebration dinner during this centennial year, we instead decided to hold these community webinars. We have also decided to launch a campaign to raise $100,000 by the end of this calendar year. In support of our students and faculty, I hope you will consider donating to our college during this challenging time. If you would like to donate to our college, the link will be in the chat box. Today, I am pleased to introduce our webinar entitled Seeing the Silver Lining, Lessons from COVID-19 in Early Childhood Education. Next slide, please, Liz. Our thought leaders will share brief lessons, and then we will answer questions from the audience. Next slide. Our moderator is Caroline Soga, Program Coordinator for our Early Childhood Education Program and an assistant professor with us as well. Dr. Soga has been in the field for over 25 years and practices what she preaches on her 11-year-old son. Without further ado, here is Caroline Soga.
Thank you, Karen, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. Before we start, I would like to go over some general housekeeping guidelines. Everybody except the panelists and moderator will be muted for the duration of the session. We would like for this to be an interactive session, so please submit your questions through the Q&A link as depicted on the slide throughout the webinar. All the questions will be grouped and answered at the end. This webinar will be recorded and posted to the Honolulu CC website if you'd like to go back after to review, or if you would like to share with others that were not able to participate today. Before we begin our panel, I would like to take this time to share about Honolulu Community College's Early Childhood Education Program, which has three components that work together to help us fulfill our mission. The first component is that we provide early childhood caregiver teacher training. We have 3 stacking certificates that students can earn as they progress through the EC coursework. Each certificate meets a different licensing or accreditation requirement depending on where a student is entering the field from in terms of education, experience, and career choice within the ECE field. There's many opportunities within the ECE field, including family child care, group care, family-child interaction learning, home visitors, to name a few, and so the certificates meet the different needs. For students that have many years of experience in the ECE field, but are just beginning their higher education journey, we also offer prior learning assessments, which award college credit for a student's non-academic experiences and training. And we have 2 associate degrees, one with a specialization in preschool and the other in infant toddler. We're the only program in the state with a degree specialization in infant toddler training. And new students can enter Honolulu Community College in the EC department both in the fall and spring semester, with the spring semester 2021 starting in January 11th. We offer our coursework credit and non-credit in many different formats: online, asynchronous and synchronous, face-to-face, hybrid, on campus, and in the community. Since the COVID-19 pandemic began, we have adjusted to make even more courses available online. And tying in today's theme of lessons learned, there were many aspects of ECE that we previously thought were not possible to teach online. However, given the COVID-19 circumstances, we have discovered ways to provide engaging and high quality online learning experiences for our students while ensuring they meet professional standards and competencies. We hope to continue to find more ways to make ECE course accessible to students statewide. Finally, we have 3 laboratory centers on 3 different community college campuses: Honolulu Community College, Kapiolani Community College, and Leeward Community College, where we provide quality care and education services for UH system students, faculty, and staff, as well as the greater community. The laboratory schools also serve as practicum sites for our ECE students to gain fieldwork experience and observe best practices in ECE. Please feel free to contact me if you have any further questions or need any further information about our ECE program. Now, I would like to take the time to introduce our panelists. Today, I'm pleased to have invited 3 thought leaders in Hawaii's ECE community: Ben Naki, Vice President of Early Childhood Education Programs at Parents and Children Together; Colleen Momohara, Early Learning Specialist from the Executive Office on Early Learning; and our own Elizabeth Hartline, ECE Instructor and Site Coordinator of Alani Children's Center at Kapiolani Community College. We have asked each panelist to share with us lessons we can take away from COVID-19 to inform an intentional rebuilding of early child education that supports children, families, and educators. I would like to ask Ben to start us off.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm hoping you guys can all hear me. Just so you guys know, I do have to wear my mask because I am at my office and we have a policy to make sure we're all masked up. But just a little bit about myself. I'm the Vice President of Early Childhood Education Programs at Parents and Children Together, which is we operate Head Start and Early Head Start. I've been with the agency for about 20 years in different roles as a father facilitator and home visiting, family engagement coordinator, and then also a director overseeing the Head Start and Early Head Start programs. I'm born and raised in Kalihi, currently live in Ewa, but nice to be working in the community that I grew up in here in Kalihi. Our office is out of Kuhio Park Terrace, right in central Kalihi. I also have a wife and a 14-year-old daughter who just went back to in-person services today. So pretty exciting day today for us. As far as lessons learned, I just want to briefly touch on 2 things. The first thing is around engagement. All of our classrooms right now are closed. We just started opening up, 3 classrooms, but primarily we have been virtual since March. And we have around 48 Head Start and Early Head Start classrooms between Oahu and Hawaii Island. And so one of the big pillars for Head Start is around engagement of families. And I think during this COVID pandemic, one of the things that we really centered on is because we weren't able to have the kids in our classrooms, we really relied heavily on the engagement piece, which is an important part of our program. And engagement level has always been kind of like one of the hallmarks for Head Start. And when we're talking engagement, we're talking really getting parents involved in the in and outs of what's happening in classrooms, in home visits, and really centering services around, as you guys know, parents or caregivers as the child's first teacher. And then the second area for lessons learned, I would say, is around trauma-informed care and the social emotional development of children and the things they may be experiencing or families may be experiencing at home, because we are in a virtual model. More so, and a lot of families are actually probably dealing with some trauma. Because our program is geared toward working with very vulnerable families, to be a part of our program, families need to be at or below the federal poverty guideline, which is for a family of four, that would be around $29,000. So you have to, we're working with families that are living in poverty. We've seen more families looking out for services from us. And during the pandemic, of course, trauma is something that all of our families are dealing with, whether it's stress around work, stress around, how they're going to pay the bills. That translates to the care that's happening in the homes, and also the engagement of the level of engagement families are able to commit to. And so for our staff, one of the big things we want to equip them with is being able to be trauma responsive in dealing with our families that we serve, to ensure they're equipped to listen and be able to have some reflective conversations based off of some of the trauma that families would be going on to. So just two things really just that came to mind around lessons learned during this pandemic we've been going through since March or actually February, is around engagement, the level of engagement with families, and then also around trauma-informed care, and then also social development for young children. So I hope that answers your question, Carolyn. That's all I got right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben, for sharing those thoughts. And next we have Colleen Momohara to share with her thoughts.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share today. I would say there's much of what we would echo as far as what Ben has shared with Head Start. Our program that we are connected with is the public pre-K program, and we partner with the Department of Education schools. But we're also, the EOEL has other system-wide responsibilities. And one of the things that has surfaced, I think, through these times, as it's been challenging for all of us, has been primarily around the opportunity to think about how we can reimagine and re-engage ourselves in the work that we are doing. And so there's been a lot around the reinventing in terms of how we've been having to think through things. You can go ahead and just click on the rest of the whole slide will show up. Thank you. So we had to start the year recognizing that we do need to maintain that physical distancing. But we wanted to remind ourselves that, this is early childhood education. We definitely have the social cultural context that we want to be so mindful about within our field. And we chose to start our way of thinking about this as saying that what we know about children has not changed, and what we know about children and families has not changed. What we know is that our context has changed. And so we wanted to remind ourselves that we've had to make sure that we kept at the core of our work that these responsive relationships, the reciprocity with each other and children and families in our relationship building, the complexities of all of that and how that all goes into the design of what we do in our day-to-day services and programs for families and children. We didn't want to forget about that. And we just want to tell ourselves that the context has changed. So context has changed, but we still need to be true to what we know. So it's certainly led us, I think, to see this as a way to strengthen our own resiliency and agency as we work with children and families. And our work primarily from the office is working with the teachers and the schools and administrators. And so I think some of the things that we've walked away with is opportunities that we see to continuously embed the importance of the work that we do with children and families. That it really is building the mindset for ourselves, or maybe enhancing our mindsets of being those folks who are going to be starting from an inquiry-based way of thinking and collaborating with each other, sort of building our own caring community of learners the way we want to do for children, and doing it for ourselves more intentionally than ever before, because we are not as connected by virtue of not being able to be in person with each other. And so we tried to approach it, and we found it's been such a wonderful opportunity to have to think differently about what we do. And it's the thinking of it together, and that searching and problem solving, and just that synergy of the conversations that we have in addressing whatever issues arise. And so there's been a lot of dissonance and a lot of conflict in terms of what we know, what we don't want to do, and what we should do, and how to go about doing that. But it's been a rich environment in which we can and we have been able to engage in this kind of back and forth, sort of a community of practice or professional learning communities. And I think that's a silver lining for us, is that we have an opportunity here to think more thoughtfully about what we do, as well as to recommit our efforts in how we want to support children and families. And so the time spent reading more and dialoguing more, and slowing ourselves down enough to make sure that we take care of ourselves, so that we can be the best that needs to be as we work together. So I think, for if anything, this has brought on is the opportunity to stop and think back. Although it's been very challenging, and there's lots of things that are overwhelming in many ways. And it's so difficult to plan far ahead, but get better at doing short-term planning a lot better than we have ever done before. But again, it's challenged us in ways that I think are re-energizing, and certainly gives me hope in the sense of how we are going to have to move forward now. It doesn't take away all of the stressors and everything, and just the challenges and barriers created for families and children in particular. But the opportunity to recommit ourselves to doing something really important as we move through this, and as we move beyond COVID, I think is a source of strength moving forward. So, thank you.
Thank you, Colleen, for that reminder of the importance of reconnecting with each other and working together. I want to turn the conversation over to Liz Hartline now, so she can share the lessons that she has learned.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Hartline. I am an early childhood education instructor at HCC, and I am also the site coordinator for Alani Children's Center, which is our children's center lab preschool run at KCC, but it's run by HCC. But so I spend most of my days in a children's center. We reopened at the end of August, and it's been kind of wild. We had to severely cut the number of children that we accepted, and we are not relying on student workers this semester. We have a lot of different protocols in place, and it's been really interesting, to say the least. I've been in the field for about 15 years as a preschool teacher and a preschool administrator, and now I'm faculty. This is my third year at HCC, and I live in Manoa with my wife and our dog, and you can see him there. His name is Loki, and he is 11 years old. So the question was, what have I learned from COVID-19 that I want to take with me to build going forward? And my kind of saying is, even hippie progressive educators can find uses for technology that are developmentally appropriate and connecting. I identify as a hippie progressive educator. For those of you guys who know the ECE field, I worked for Bank Street College in New York for about 8 years. So that is as like kind of touchy-feely as we come. We would never consider having a computer in the classroom there. We would never think that it was, appropriate to have kids on Zoom, prior pandemic. But here we are. So the lesson I've learned is that we can all find ways to use technology to connect. And I would have never thought I would have there. So I have a little video for you guys about one way that we're using technology at Alani. Let's go.
This is our class dojo at Alani. And you can see that we're using it from everything from posting messages about missing clothes to documenting learning to posting videos of the kids just playing. It's an extremely helpful tool for us to show families what's going on in the classroom in a way that really wasn't possible before.
Okay, so if you have children in elementary school, you probably know about Class Dojo. I didn't know about Class Dojo because in my head, a commercial product, even though it's free, to use to document kids learning just wasn't in my kind of scope of vision. But this is just one example that we've been using technology to connect with families. Families love this. Like I said, we're posting messages on there, we're posting learning on there, we post lesson plans on there, and it's a really good way to centralize all of these like emails and texts and paper flyers and all of this stuff and give families a window into the classroom. For those of you educators out there, you know how taxing it can be to have all of these photos of children on different devices in your room when you're putting together portfolios at the end. One of our teachers, Marissa, said, I love Class Dojo because I don't have to have all these pictures of kids on my phone anymore. And this is not a Class Dojo ad. I have no relationship with Class Dojo. But this is just one example about how we have taken this opportunity, which was kind of sad that families could not be in the classroom anymore, that we couldn't have this welcoming physical space for them anymore and make it a welcoming virtual space. And I think this also extends to children as well. We are running an online lab at Alani this semester. We have a few kids whose families felt safer keeping them at home. And our lab instructor, Lorianne Takeno, and her student are running Zoom sessions and engaging them in learning. And is it ideal? No. Would we rather they be in person? Yeah. But there's such deep and relevant and interesting conversations that are coming up with those families and with those children. And again, this is not something that we would have considered appropriate 1 year ago. So I think that there's so much space for this to grow. I don't know what next semester is going to look like. None of us know, obviously, what next semester is going to look like, or next week's going to look like, or next year is going to look like. But I do think that COVID for me has challenged what I thought I knew, which was that technology with children is always kind of a no-go, and forced me to broaden my opinion and horizon about that. So that's all. Back to you, Caroline.
Thank you, Liz. Yes, COVID has challenged all of us to be flexible and pivot, and I think that's definitely one of the lessons learned. Now it's time for you in the audience to share any questions that you might have for our panelists, and then we'll field it out to all of our panelists, and then move it from there. So the first question we have is, will the slides be available afterwards? Yes, this is being recorded, so the slides can show up in there, and we can make the slides available too, I believe. Another question we have, that was actually brought in through the RSVP was, has COVID-19 brought new considerations to ECE regarding workforce development, and how so? So this was not directed to any specific panelists, but we can all go forward and answer the question. I know I can share some of my thoughts too on that, which is a build off of what Liz was saying earlier, which is I think in the ECE field, especially in higher education, we had assumed because it's such a hands-on learning that really you can't learn unless you're with children. And so most of our courses were, even though we had other options, most of our courses were face to face and in our lab centers. But COVID has forced us to think more flexibly. And as Liz said, we had an online lab for students, and that creates opportunities for many of our students that are already working in the field or that are not located in an area near one of our lab centers to be able to participate in lab that they wouldn't have been able to before. So it's created different opportunities for students across the state that because of the way it was formatted before, some of our courses and the structures of it, that they wouldn't be able to participate. So that will help us to be able to meet the needs of developing a ECE workforce more efficiently and effectively.
I also just want to add that, like probably most of you who are in the field, I get conference invites like every week. I mean, they've slowed down a little bit, but especially through the summer, conference. Most of them are free. And all of them are being recorded. You can access them for money. But I think that this has really hugely expanded our ability to engage teachers in professional development, because before the online PD just wasn't really that much of an option. But now you can say, oh, here's a 1 hour webinar on trauma-informed practice. Let's do this at staff PD on Friday, or this is your homework and you have an hour of time to do it. So I think that that's really seminal, and I can't imagine that we're going to go back to all in-person conferences after this. Any AYC are like premier conferences online, and I would be surprised if after this all passes, if we don't maintain some of these kinds of really rich professional development opportunities.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what Elizabeth talks about around the PD. Because our classrooms have been closed since March, and we've been doing mainly just virtual work, PD opportunities have opened up for our teaching staff, the teachers that are in the classroom. We hardly get a chance to send staff to national conferences, local conferences, state conferences, or even like small little workshops, because we got to find coverage for the classroom. So this has definitely given us the opportunity to send staff. Like there's a regional family engagement conference happening this week, which usually happens in Hawaii, and we never send teachers because our classrooms are open. Because it's virtual this year, we're able to send a bunch of our teachers to the conference, and they can participate fully, not like just a workshop here and there. So I think the opportunity for PD has definitely been a lot more flexible for us, and we're able to do that. The other thing I wanted to also mention is kind of piggyback on what Colleen had mentioned around, and also Liz, around DAP, and that, like Colleen mentioned, the status quo, DAP is the status quo. That doesn't change. It's just COVID is now the new manipulative. And so it's really thinking out of the box, how to stay true to developmentally appropriate practices. You can't compromise that. So a lot of the work that our teachers have been doing virtually, and they've been using instruments, I should say frameworks and platforms like Google Classrooms, Classroom Dojo. We have teachers that are using, they're able to do these Bitmoji type of classrooms for staff, but majority of the virtual things they're doing are geared for the family, to engage the family, also to engage the child, but more so to engage the parents, because the amount of time they're spending in those classrooms is very small. And so giving them the resource for something that the parent can do with their child at home. We have one home visitor, because we do home visiting services. We have a home visitor who opened a YouTube channel and demonstrated different activities that the parents can do with their kids, and they can do with their infants and toddlers in the community at home, how to do gross motor skills in your living room in a safe environment and whatnot. And so, our teachers have been phenomenal. I mean, would we ever been doing this 5-10 years ago? Probably not. I mean, so I think because we were forced to think outside of the box, staff were forced to think out of the box, teachers. A lot of amazing ideas have come through, and we've just started to also share, because some teachers struggle in a kind of a virtual dynamic with families, and other people excel. And so right now, our big thing is kind of being able to have teachers network between Oahu and the Big Island, because we do programming on both islands, to kind of share in brown bag training sessions, like, hey, this is something that's working for me. This is how you make a YouTube video. This is how you upload a YouTube video. This is how you share a YouTube video. Like, things we probably wouldn't be having conversation about, let alone a year ago, is more common now. And so it's just been pretty remarkable on what's been happening, despite not having children in person in classrooms and whatnot. So, but we're always gearing up for that. But in the interim, let's stay true to, making sure things we're doing with the children are developmentally appropriate, and let's engage the families, engage the parents and the caregivers. So, sorry, just wanted to add my 2 cents.
I wanted to tag on a little bit to what was said as well. Definitely the opportunity to connect with families through online platforms has been just partly a game changer in many ways for us, and it really is about partnering between home and school, or home and center, or home and program, in order and to work collaboratively together to support children. And certainly that, I think, that's wonderful, and it's such a fine line, because I struggle with worrying that I hope that what does not come out of this is the unintended message that this is good enough down the road, right, for children. I think sometimes in our efforts to, and I say this for myself, I'm not saying it about necessarily anyone else, but sometimes I hear myself and I'm saying, oh, well, we're managing this, and this is going well, and this is going well. And then I have to stop and ask myself, for someone who doesn't know the field, or someone who has not been with children, or that is not really their world, what is that interpretation going to be? And sometimes just hearing from, elementary and secondary, it's like, oh, this is doable, we can do this. And it's like, well, really not. If you think about the depth of learning and the kinds of things that need to happen in person, that we are on hold right now. So I think there's a balance between what we have to say, and we have to think about who the audience might be as we're saying it. So that it's always been my struggle with this particular situation. I don't know what the answer is, other than just trying to be mindful of what comes out of my mouth sometimes. I think some of the things related to workforce too, definitely it's, there's much for our own field to learn more about, right? Many of our teachers are learning, more things about tech and everything, and that's really great, and what we can use it for. And then being mindful about that is a tool, and just like for children, it's a tool, and it can be a really nice tool, but it's not the end all and be all. And so some things we're finding just does not work as well. The kinds of things where we need to be on the ground doing modeling and observation, supporting a targeted observation and modeling it for people, is really hard to do that via video. And I guess the further along, I think if we've had lots of experiences, or folks that have lots of opportunity and have depth of knowledge, it's not it's so doable and it helps. But I think for people who haven't had enough of that real life experience of being with kids, it's definitely, we see it as a challenge as we try to work to support them in that. And it's just those little things that I notice about this current world in terms of just the people is that we see each other so much on screen, and then when we do get to see each other live, it's almost like, oh, it's a three-dimensional person. And one of the teachers shared with me how they got to see one of the kids come by and just had forgotten how tiny the kids were, because they see them visually like this all the time. So that's there. I mean, fortunately for us, for the public pre-K at least, majority of the classrooms are face-to-face. It's a really small percentage that are experiencing things on an online basis. And so for them, they've definitely appreciated that they've been able to do that. But I think the craving for more time to learn together, and wondering, and the worry about what's going to happen as we open up. You know, where is everyone who the childcare industry, and you know, how many people have we lost in the process, and how many will be able to come back? Those are all worries I think we all have. And so more so the importance of our continuing work to perpetuate the importance of the field and the work that's being done, and try to get more people to come into the field. And that's really hard when we aren't being paid. So that is certainly the recognition there. But hopefully we've had recognition of the value of care and education for children during these times.
Thank you, Colleen and Liz and Ben, for sharing your thoughts on considerations for the EC workforce development. The second question is on what suggestions do you have for how to encourage families to participate? And I think it's a two-part question, because the questions also has enrollment dropped. So I think the being behind there is, with COVID, are we seeing a decrease in enrollment from the families? And if so, how do we encourage them to participate?
Well, I can say from our perspective, we have had this kind of two-pronged situation at our children's centers, where we have decreased capacity, but we have also seen decreased demand, as many families are trying to keep their children as safe as possible. It's funny, Ben and Colleen are in two like absolute opposites. Colleen, you say most of your EOEL schools are back. Ben, they're mostly not back. We're like right in the middle. So we are half back kind of. I think that just continuing to reach out to families and partner with them. I honestly feel like a spammer half the time, because I am always like, here's more resources. So we've been doing a lot of Google surveys, honestly, for our families, saying like, what do you need right now? How can we support you? What will be helpful? And using that information to shape what we do. So do you want Zoom check-ins with the teacher? Do you want a newsletter with suggestions? Do you want us to leave you alone? Do you want to be off this mailing list? Do you want to check back in December to see what enrollment is about? So I think those are kind of the things. And everyone's just working with a different set of cards right now. Like some people can't, just barely make it through the day. It's so stressful to have young children at home. Our biggest reason for families not re-enrolling their kids is because they live with vulnerable family members. They have a newborn at home, or they live with parents or grandparents. And that's a significant risk that you have to take when you're thinking about enrolling your child in school. So we're just doing our best to respect families' decisions, whatever they might be, and meeting them where they're at. So
I would have to say, pretty much echoing what Elizabeth shared too. It's just been different in different situations in different areas, and because specifically for the public pre-K classrooms, those are in conjunction, it's a partnership with the Department of Education. So, I mean, the openings and closings of it, it depends upon what's happening in that complex area and with that school. And I would say that it did start off fairly slower, obviously because of just the spread of COVID. We still see, trickling in of applications. Folks are, they're interested now, and perhaps if they're going back to work, and I'm hoping that's a good sign for those who are wanting to apply. But it's varied, and it's all over. I think something that has been helpful has just been the acknowledgement for families that folks are here for you, and of the ones that we get to be in contact with, is to continuously build that, play off of that partnership and support each other through it. And I as far as others coming back on it, we hope that that is something that they'll eventually be able to bring their kids back to campus, or feel safe coming back onto a school setting. And these are bigger campuses, right? I mean, they've got lots more kids on there too, in the setting as well. So we certainly can understand that. And I think at this point in time, it's just acknowledging that and just being available for the time being. But I think that's easier said than done, as programs are, many programs need tuition in order to survive. So I don't know that there's a clear answer to that. But hopefully, if we keep doing what we're doing with the folks that we're with, word will get out, and then people will feel the need to bring their kids back and feel find out that they can feel safe, or at least comforted, knowing that people are there for them.
So just to add, and Carlene's right. I mean, funding source dictates kind of how much you can, who you can serve, and how many individuals you can serve, how many kids you can serve. Our program is federally funded, so we have right now our source of funding has been really good. And we also have the flexibility, as I mentioned earlier, we do center-based, home-based. We also have a couple of family child care home providers that are open. I mean, they've been open, they haven't closed. And then we also partner with Come On Kids to do some early head start services. I think overall, when we look at how much we're funded, or how many kids we're supposed to be serving versus how many we actually are, whether it's virtual or in person, we're probably about at 50% right now capacity. And we're funded to serve over 800 children between Oahu and Big Island. So we're looking at around 400 kids right now, as far as getting some type of service from us, or from Come On Kids, or from our family child care provider homes. And so some of that is intentional. On our end, for the classrooms that we operate that are virtual right now, we made a decision to just focus on returning kids for our infant toddler program from last year to this year, as well as for our preschool program from last year to this year. We're starting to take on some new infants and toddlers, families, and even pregnant mothers, because we do home visiting as well too. But right now we're keeping things small in anticipation of, if we do open up, we'll be at if we do open up for in-person, we'll be at a funding or enrollment level that will be conducive for the environment and whatnot. And so we're keeping our numbers pretty small right now. And luckily, our federal, the federal office that provides us the funding is allowing us that flexibility. So we're a little fortunate that we can do that. But still, we're always recruiting for new families to apply for our program. I think we're starting to be a little bit more aggressive because we are trying to increase our enrollment, mainly with our infant toddler program. and our home visiting program. We're trying to beef up our enrollment on that side. So what we are continuing, and our pitch is, we have services that we can provide, not just a child, but the entire family through our federal funding. So we kind of use that as our kind of like our pitch line. Like, it's not just childcare, it's not just a home visiting program. It's really to help your whole family kind of identify, some of the things that are going well and some of the things, you might need a little assistance on. And hey, we have some resources and we have some staff that can definitely kind of hold your hand and walk with you toward goals that they want to accomplish. And so that's always been the Head Start way, is just to work with families and not for them, not against them, of course, but really working side by side with families to figure out what is it that they need. And so, but enrollment is low, and then, like I said, it's intentional at this point, because we know that the classrooms and in-person home visits are the best way to really work with the families and the the children under the age of 5, and so we're trying to gear up for that. So we're keeping our enrollment numbers low right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz and Ben and Colleen. And I just wanted to add that, before COVID, if families already felt unsure about or where early child education fit with their families, I think a lesson learned is even more so now after COVID. Families are feeling scared about what would be best for them. So I think a big part of our role will be to help families understand all the different opportunities out there, and that, if one doesn't feel like the right fit for you, there's another fit that might fit for you. It could be group care, it could be family home based, it could be a home visit, but there are many different modalities that we can provide early childhood education and care services for families. So it'll be our role to make sure we are sharing that with everybody. Our next question is, during COVID, we saw how important childcare facilities are to our economy and to our children. How do we continue to advocate that message with COVID experiences in mind?
Woo! This is the hard one, right? Like Ben, I mean, it's interesting because we all work for government agencies. My paycheck comes from UH, Colleen works for the state, Ben works for PACT, which gets their money from the federal government. So in a sense, the three of us, I think, have been sheltered a little bit more than folks in the private industry, which, for those of you guys who don't know, has been really absolutely decimated by COVID. Just the brunt of all of the woes of society always kind of are held on the backs of early childhood care educators and families of young children. And this has really exacerbated this. I don't have an answer. I don't know what this is going to look like. It certainly looks pretty dire right now, honestly, for the future of our industry. I do think that you've seen this infusion of cash from the federal government and the CARES money. And many programs are eligible for that. So that has been, I think that that's helped people stay afloat. And I think the more engaged that people are with their representatives and with, being a voice in society, the more you can keep this movement going, because we can't do this without government support. We really cannot. It is a failure of our society that the US is the only OPEC nation that has no paid parental leave, and that that the average percentage of a single parent household's income that goes to childcare is 52% in this country, which is double, or it's quadruple the number it is in the other OPEC nations. So this is a big failure of society, and I think that now is the time that is a really opportunity for us to be the voice of families who are so vulnerable and who really need us to say, like, this is stop, you guys, like, we're not going to be able to make it otherwise. So Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know what the answer is. But I do think people understand now how valuable childcare is. If anything, I think communities across the nation understand and now I think value childcare even more so. So it's probably certainly an opportunity to have conversations that like Congress members and even state legislators to just make sure that they don't forget like childcare was considered an essential service. Childcare, you didn't have to shut down. Programs shut down because they had to, whether it was because of funding, capacity, because like we had to shut down because we had staff that wouldn't be able to work because their kids didn't have school. So it's kind of like this snowball effect of how do you provide childcare and ensure that the teachers who are providing childcare have childcare for their own children. And so it is. I'm right there with Elizabeth. Like I don't know the answer. I do feel like there is opportunity to really kind of continue to inform people that make the laws and people that set policy. Like childcare is very important to the economy, and rightfully so. But and you know and I think it I hope it doesn't become overlooked when whether it's the state government or the federal government are trying to make policy changes and whatnot. I'm hoping they understand and remember that without childcare, things aren't going to be happening. People aren't going to be able to go to work, and also taking care of the people that are doing childcare, that are working with children at very young ages. It's different. It's a different field and whatnot, but it's very needed.
I just want to add on to that too. I guess yes, it is. I think trying to take advantage of this momentum that has at least started with the acknowledgement that care and education for young children is essential, and how do we, as we have to think ahead, because there'll be other times and we'll encounter other kinds of crises. How will we not fall into this, right? What are the lessons learned, not just for us within early childhood, but just trying to recover and going through this second or waves of COVID infections and everything. What have we learned from all of this? And I hope too that it's not just, I mean, it will take, I think, that the kind of collective and concerted effort on our part to think about how we as a profession here in Hawaii decide to create opportunities for voices to be heard. And what is the message? What kind of messaging are we going to send out? Besides the fact that it's essential, is there anything else we need to consider? I think about what families and children deserve. Yes, it's important to the economy in so many ways, right? Not just for the fact that we have to work, but just sort of the long term. I don't think I think we should make sure we don't lose sight or help policymakers and other leaders mindful of the long-term effects that we are looking at here, right? All of the reasons for early childhood, which is not to get them ready for kindergarten, which is what pre-K always has to contend with, right? This is not about kindergarten alone. And that there's so many things that relate to the quality of life and long-term for these children, which is going to impact the community, which in turn affects families in all kinds of ways. And that kind of scope of impact, I'm not quite sure. I think that, I don't know if it's to what extent it's understood. It's just obviously not understood to the point of making decisions that totally support quality, because, just by viewing some of the things that go on out there in terms of what's provided or made available isn't always with the best interests of children. in mind. And so, I mean, how can we move forward to think about what other things need to be mentioned about the importance for care and education for children?
Thank you. Yes, I agree that the federal government and the state government has all deemed, childcare to be essential, and there's some, funding coming through now. But before COVID, childcare was struggling in terms of workforce and also making sure that we had the necessary funding to stay afloat. So now after COVID, if we are saying that we are essential, and I agree with Colleen, essential beyond just supporting our economy, but supporting families, supporting children in their development. Um, what are we doing as a state or as a country to support our early childhood education, to make sure that the staff are feeling safe and have the knowledge that they need to make sure that we're providing high quality programs continue throughout this COVID times and beyond. So I do challenge all of us here on this webinar to make that voice be heard, because this is why we're here. We want to know what we're going to do with ECE beyond. And so it's hard for us, I think, because we are with the children and we're in the field. We're just trying to make sure that things are being provided for families, that we get busy and caught up with that. But there is this bigger responsibility that we have to the field. So I thank everybody. It's 1:57, and so we have 3 minutes left. Before we end for the day, I just want to mention that the recording will be available after the webinar. An email will be sent to the attendees, or you can visit the website. And then I'm going to turn over to Karen for the final words.
Thank you. Thanks, Caroline. And special mahalo to all of our esteemed panelists, Ben Nucky, Colleen Momohara, Liz Hartline, and of course to our moderator, Caroline Soga. We so appreciate your time and expertise as our community continues its support of our very youngest learners. So thank you so much. And like Caroline mentioned, we will be sending you an email with a link to this recording in case you want to share it with someone. Finally, our next webinar is going to be on a totally different topic, the construction industry. And I hope that you will join us for that. That will be on Thursday, November 12th at 1 p.m. And we will send out links to that Zoom webinar next. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we hope we'll see you next month.